Hi, everyone. Today we're joined by Linda Seeley, and she's going to introduce herself and explain who she is and what she does. And we're really glad to have her. So take it away, Linda.
Sure. Thanks so much, Phoebe, for having me. I really appreciate it. My name is Linda Warren Seeley. I am the director of the section of dispute resolution for the American Bar Association.
You hosted the meeting with the Greenbelt Time Bank.
Sure.
And I wanted to know, first of all, how you got involved with the Greenbelt Time Bank to begin with.
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, I moved here to the DC area from Tennessee about 4 years ago to run the section. And in the process of looking for a place to live, I kind of stumbled on Greenbelt. A friend of mine who was also a mediator invited me to her house for dinner. And at this time, I was still looking for a permanent place to live. I was just renting a place. And I drove into GHI. And quite frankly, it was one of the weirdest places I ever saw in my whole life. And I got to my friend's house and I'm like, what in the world is this place? Because I've never seen anything quite like this. And her husband had a little book with the history of GHI and how it came about. And to be quite frank with you, I really just fell in love with the whole concept of cooperative housing. And as I'm pretty much a joiner, I like to join things and be active. And I was looking around for some things. And at the time, my husband still hadn't moved up here. So it was just me by myself. And I thought, I need to find some way to get somebody to help me with things. And just kind of stumbled across the Greenbelt Time Bank and signed up. And, I've been able to have people come over and help me do just a few little things, but it was really interesting.
Right. So for anybody who doesn't know, the Time Bank is something where you basically trade skills and
Right,
different,
exactly. Yeah.
what's the word? Activities,
Services,
services
things like
for each
that, right,
other.
right.
Yeah,
Hmm.
which is a really cool concept. I love
It
that.
really is. Yeah, my husband and I have three cats who are very near and dear to us, and when we travel, we like to have somebody come and take care of them and things like that. So that's been primarily what I've used it for. So.
So in return, I guess you hosted a um,
A
a discussion,
discussion. Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So what was the subject of the discussion?
So one of the things that dispute resolution professionals often find themselves doing is facilitating conversations, difficult conversations with people. I worked with the United Methodist Church, and we did a series of discussions amongst church members on racial reconciliation issues, and this was right after the shooting at the church in North Carolina, where we tried to kind of come together and talk about what was going on in the church, and how could white Methodists and black Methodists find common ground, and try to overcome some of the fear and the anger and the hatred that was rife at that point. And guess what? Here
And
it is
still
again.
now.
It
Yeah.
never seems to go away, does it? And I also have had situations where I led a discussion between a historically black college and a historically white, very conservative Christian college. They were talking about doing some combined curricula so that the students could, cross that racial divide. I've been involved with situations where there was a pastor who began to have an affair with a member of the congregation, and that caused a huge schism within the church. And then most recently, I've been working with the Ohio State University Moritz School of Law Divided Communities Project. And what we've done is the section got a grant along with the Ohio State Divided Communities Project. And what we do is we invite or we solicit RFPs from communities who want to address the possibility of either racial or religious conflict, but go ahead and put in place before the incidents happen, because something is going to happen, and you see it. We're living it right
Yeah.
now. Have in place processes and the right people at the table, so that when those incidents do occur, that you have a means of immediately addressing it, having a process for people to come to the table and talk about what's going on, and to try to develop some strategies, not just for dealing with it, but for making sure that people feel heard and feel understood. Because one of the things that's the most important in situations like this is to demonstrate empathy. And you saw that with a lot of the police officers and sheriffs that knelt along with the protesters. So they were showing empathy. While they may not necessarily agree with everything, they were demonstrating that I'm here. They were, and then there's attention, paying attention to what people are saying, whether you agree with them or not. And then respect. And it's those three key core principles: showing empathy, giving attention, and listening with respect, that actually can foster the kind of dialogue that we need to have whenever we're dealing with incredibly difficult conversational items. And race, religion, police brutality, sexual impropriety, all of those kinds of things are something that, whether we agree with people or not, we need to pay attention and show that we empathize, even if we didn't live what they lived. Demonstrating that empathy, putting down our shields, and kneeling with them, that's very powerful.
Those also seem like really good pieces of advice for just being in a relationship in general, in any kind of friendship or romantic relationship, just showing those three kinds of things.
Showing those three, and it's simple, but it's not easy to do that. Especially when you're feeling a great deal of emotion or upset or fear. It's so easy for us to get caught up in our own emotions. And there is one other thing I think is really important, and that is to develop your own emotional intelligence. And part of emotional intelligence is, yes, being able to identify and understand what somebody else is feeling, and to, offer the words or the gestures that show that you do have some empathy with them. But it also means that you have to practice a certain amount of self-regulation and recognize that everything doesn't revolve around you, that sometimes people say things and you shouldn't take it personally, that sometimes they just don't have the words that they need in order to express things properly. So, in addition to ear, which is the empathy, attention, and respect, working on developing your own self-awareness and working on, being attentive to other people's feelings, but also being attentive to what you are feeling.
So when you were talking about this discussion, I guess at that time, none of the situation in Minneapolis had unfolded yet. So were you mostly discussing this in terms of quarantine and the pandemic?
Actually, the discussion, what we were trying to address was that whenever you are dealing with somebody else, you have to be very clear about what your expectations and your intentions are. So when you're doing the time bank, you're entering something into a small text box online. Say, I need somebody to take care of my cats. And then I might get back from 2 or 3 people, oh, I'm available on those dates at those times. But I need to be very clear when I have somebody come into my house. These are my expectations. This is what I need you to do. I need to be very forthright and honest at the beginning about what my expectations are. I expect you to come in at least twice a day. I expect you to not only clean out the cat bowls and refill them, but also to let the cats in and out, and maybe even clean out the cat box, which is not a fun thing.
Please.
Yeah, really. And so when you do invite somebody in to do things for you, and they don't meet the expectations or the intentions are misconstrued, you need to be able to do it directly, address somebody and say, I had thought that you agreed to do ABC, you did XYZ. Can we talk about that? And that's a hard thing to do. It is, I mean, anytime you have to talk to somebody about their failure to meet your expectations, or if you haven't been clear about what the expectations were or the boundaries, then you need to have those kind of conversations, because the kinds of things that you are asking people to do in a time bank, well, I mean, some of those are pretty intimate, like taking care of the cats. That's to me pretty intimate. Or driving me to the airport. There's just some things that you have to be able to be direct about, be intentional about, and have the conversation, even if it's difficult. Because what we don't want is for people to become involved in the time bank and then become disappointed because there was not clarity. But they have to be the ones that are clear about what they want and what they need. So the conversation was really about, when you do engage with somebody in the context of the time bank, you need to be clear and intentional and state your expectations. And if the person doesn't meet that, then we'd like you to deal with that head on. And if it really doesn't work, then we've got some administrators that can kind of step in, but we'd really rather not have to do that. So
since we're living through some really major moments in time right now, do you feel like it's become more contentious in terms of how people are able to relate to each other and discuss with each other?
I think in the political realm that sometimes our political leaders fail us. And they fail us when they don't offer the opportunity for healing, for understanding, and when things kind of take a more militaristic turn. I think what you find is that when you are confrontational, when you are militaristic, when you are demanding, without offering some understanding, then I think you miss the opportunity to really bring about meaningful dialogue and change. Think about how you feel, if you're accosted by somebody, and it's not a pleasant accosting, and I mean, do you automatically just say, "Oh, I'm so sorry," or do you respond with equal anger? And people generally respond with either hiding and not being willing to kind of face that, like if you're in a sexual abuse or domestic violence kind of situation, which means that you just end up being more victimized, or you become angry, and neither of which is a healthy way of bringing about a resolution. So
fight or flight, just
mm-hmm.
in personal
right.
relationships.
Exactly, right. That's a very good shorthand way of describing what I'm talking about. I just feel that if we could stop and listen with intentionality to each other. My experience, based on my age and where I was raised in the South, and my age, my experiences are not going to be the same as, say, a young Black man who is raised in the DC area. I don't have his experiences. I don't know what he's lived through, and I don't know how he feels. And it's presumptuous of me to simply dismiss his concerns without listening and trying to understand that his experiences and his life situation is markedly different from mine. And if we would listen and respect and understand those differences, I actually think we could come up with some pretty decent um, ways of dealing with a current situation. If we're just angry and yelling and threatening, we're not going to get anywhere. We're not going to resolve anything, and we're not going to find common ground so that we can find the kinds of solutions that we need as a country. Clearly, this country is in crisis and chaos.
Absolutely.